Our panel today is going to include Director Jimi Okubanjo, who is the producer and director of Arise Firebird, Dr. Pamela McCauley, the Dean of the School of Engineering at Widener University, and Dr. Ari Kozik, an associate professor of the University of Michigan. So each of our panelists is going to have some time to have a little bit more personal introduction for themselves in a few minutes, but I'm going to briefly introduce each one of them now. So Ms. Okubanjo is an experienced ex-corporate executive and operational excellence expert with over 22 years of experience in operations and management consulting. She's led the operational transformations across multiple management consult industries, including energy, mining, infrastructure, and financial services. Her multi-industry experience and her firsthand knowledge of what senior and experienced female leaders of color often face in the workplace led her to direct and produce the documentary Arise Firebird to celebrate the resilience and empowerment of women and BIPOC professionals in the workplace. So through storytelling, Jimi uses the documentary to catalyze discussions with leadership teams to enable them to engage in meaningful conversations and drive impactful change. Our next panel member is Dr. Ari Kozik. She's an assistant professor at the University of Michigan, where her research spans the intersection of the human microbiome, systems biology, and inflammatory disease to examine host microbe and microbe-microbe relationships in airway inflammatory diseases like asthma. Ari is passionate about science communication and promoting equity in science and medicine, which is evident in her advocacy and service work. She's the co-founder and vice president of the Black Microbiologists Association, serves on the Health Equity and Diversity Committee of the American Thoracic Society, and works with the Microbes and Social Equity Working Group. This year, Dr. Kozik was a co-recipient of the William A. Hinton Award for Advancement of Diverse Community of Microbiologists from the ASM. Our third panel member is working to join us. This will be Dr. Pamela McCauley, who is a national and internationally recognized expert in ergonomics, biomechanics, and engineering leadership research. She has her PhD in industrial engineering and has held university leadership roles as Dean of the School of Engineering at Widener University, and previously as Associate Dean for Academic Programs, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at the Wilson College of Textiles at NC State University. Throughout her career, she's been a strong advocate for advancing diversity, equity, and inclusion, and has served as leadership on boards of many societies, including the Association for Women in Science and the Women's Engineering Program Advocates Network, among others. So welcome to all our panelists. We're really excited you could join us today, and welcome everyone in the audience. We're excited for everybody to be part of this conversation. So I'm sure this documentary has caused a lot of emotions in many of us. So I'm actually going to turn this over to Jimi right now to lead us in a short grounding exercise, followed by some thoughts from herself, and then we'll move to the other panel members. Jimi?
Thank you. Thank you. So I'm just going to read something. So what I would ask everyone to do, if you feel comfortable, is to just sit. If you're sitting, and if you can close your eyes, please do. And if you can put your hands on your chest, so you can feel the warmth of your hands over your chest, and just listen to what I have to say. We are firebirds with wings of red and gold flames. When we spread our wings, we light up the night sky. Others do not have to understand our light. For many, our light is so bright, it blinds and burns. But no matter, we are firebirds. We aren't bound by shame and conformity, no longer locked into having to act in the ways of other birds. We are firebirds. We are free to be ourselves. No longer do we silence our intuition. No longer do we quiet our bird song. No longer do we pretend we are happy when they clip our wings and pour out toxic powder to put out our flames. No longer are we burning, angry, hurting, and bitter at ourselves. No longer do we doubt ourselves. We are firebirds. Our job is to shine bright, to light up the night sky, and to draw people to themselves. All we can do is shine because we can't help it. Our flames, like passion, is our breathing. When we were locked inside with parrots, we lost our voice. When we soared with eagles, we lost our way. The hawk, the owl, and the chicken don't understand us. Our duty is to be true, to light up the night sky, to shine powerfully. And when we shine the brightest, others will see and find their way. I am a firebird. We are firebirds. We cannot dim our light. We cannot dim our light. Daughter, set yourself free. Light up the night sky. So you may take a second to come back to yourself. My name is Jimi Okubanjo, and I'm really happy to be here. I'm the director, I'm the producer of Arise Firebird, Women of Color Transcending and Finding Joy at Work. And my hope with the film, my hope with this discussion and with the movie, that really anybody, regardless of their ethnicity, gender, or really any other consideration for exclusion or marginalization, to understand that it isn't okay to be, if for whatever we may have encountered in terms of toxic work, and it's normal if we're still struggling. But I also want to hopefully create a space here where you can share your story, ask where you need to ask, and to continue getting the support or to start getting support from the community at ASM to be able to go through our career journeys and not be alone. I'm going to stop there, and I will say whatever I have to say for the Q&A, but please do feel free to ask questions of me, of the project, but also of what we're trying to do with the film, because our goal and our hope is to really be able to have these conversations in workplaces, in professional spaces like this, so people do feel less alone and also more empowered to do something, even if it isn't supported. So, and when I say do something, getting help, so getting therapy, getting a support system, telling somebody you're struggling, having a conversation with an employer who is not supportive and challenging and speaking up. Whatever that looks like, it will be different for all of us. But the hope is that we'll be able to help ourselves do something, or even help somebody else going through this who may not have the words also do something. Thank you very much. And I look forward to the conversation later on.
Thanks for that, Jimi. That was really very powerful, what you read. Ari, do you want to take a couple minutes just to introduce yourself personally to the audience, and then we can move forward with questions and answers?
Great. Yes, so my name is Ari. I'm a microbiologist and an assistant professor, and also the co-founder and vice president of the Black Microbiologists Association. This is an organization, a nonprofit that was started by myself and 4 other Black women, early career scientists, who really were trying to create a space for connection and support among an academic environment that doesn't always give us that space. And so there have been many times during my journey through science where I've felt the frustration and isolation that was described in the film. The institutions that I've trained at have been all predominantly white institutions. And so I've always been, one of few or one of a handful from middle school onward. And so I remember acutely how it felt when I realized that someone who was supposed to be in a leadership or a mentorship or teaching capacity, when I realized that they had underestimated me, or I realized that they thought that I did not or could not, achieve whatever it was that the goal was. And so this has happened at several levels. And also when you are in an environment where you have peers, sometimes, other students who say things that are, problematic or microaggression, sometimes macroaggression, not having a place to go to process those things, and therefore having to internalize them and try to, metabolize them on your own. And so that kind of isolation, which I think is one of the themes of the film, is that there was a lot of isolation going on in each case, that can be so damaging. But that isolation is where you're trying to process your experience kind of by yourself. And so that, experience of isolation, that phenomenon was kind of the driving force behind the creation of BMA, was because, during 2020, when we first started, a friend and I, through in the summertime, there was just so much violence and so much grief in the Black community, not just in the US, but really like across the world, as we were having the responses to these cases. And, we were still coming to work every day and, working in the lab, or, going to seminars or sitting in class. And just the difference in, sitting in a space and being, very, very activated, where, you don't feel safe and you don't know like who you can go to. And so it was really hard to navigate that in an academic space when you're so isolated and don't feel like you have a place of comfort. And so by bringing together in a virtual space, students and faculty from, across the US and globally, who are so often scattered across institutions, and so in very small numbers, being able to create that tangible community of support was really important. And I think that academic and workplace cultures can be really challenging to navigate. And similar to the message of the film, just from my experience, I strongly believe that community is the way forward, and that we have to work to build this kind of community so that the talent that exists, and, in my case, in the academic realm, that these students are able to have what they need to thrive so that they can reach their professional potential.
Thank you for that, Ari. That was really one of the take-home messages for me too, for the film, was kind of the importance of not struggling in isolation, and how hard that is to stay isolated when you come into these, toxic environments, and you have to deal with these microaggressions and everything every single day. And so for people in the audience, please go ahead and throw questions in the chat. I do have one, and I'd be curious to hear from both of you with this whole idea of isolation and community, and how important community is. What types of kind of support and networks do you use to find community? And then what advice do you have for others on how to build and find that support? Ari, I think it's wonderful that you started the Black Microbiologists Association. There's a lot of people that don't know how to go out doing some of those things. So what advice would you have for others who are trying to kind of build those support networks?
So from me and my experience, I mean, BMA is not the first time that I have done this kind of like community building. So when I was a graduate student, I had my first child during my third year of my PhD training, and I didn't know any other students who had kids. And it was very much a very invisible minority, and just simple things like, where can I go to nurse? And like, what do I do about like childcare? What happens if all of these things about institutional support were just so hard to find. And so I created an organization called the Graduate Parent Support Network at my institution. And so it was through that way, just very organically, I was just trying to find other moms, who also is working on their PhD and have children, and we have infants, and who else is going through this. But through that, reaching out and forming a social group, you can kind of build power that way, because you hear other people's experiences who were different from mine, but we have very similar needs and very similar questions. And so I think that a lot of times it starts just by talking to others and just telling your story and reaching out and saying, like, this is what I've experienced. And I think we need this. Do you feel the same way, or do you know other people in your personal network? And so through that kind of combination of communication and just building a coalition of individuals who are sharing a similar experience, I think a lot can be done just by doing that. And then when you come together as a group, you can say, okay, like, what are the structural or systemic things that we are up against? How do we organize around those issues?
Right, that communicating and sharing with others seems to be a really big theme. Jimi, what are your thoughts on kind of advice you would have for others on how to find or build that support community?
I would say, first, for the people who are isolating, if you're in crisis, if you or someone you is in crisis, I would say getting help, medical support if you can. A lot of cities in the U.S. have public hospitals that there is some money set aside for mental health crises. The mental health support is actually underutilized, so it may be worth finding out whether or not you have the insurance. Is there some support you can get? And I would say definitely, do that, especially if you're in a dark space or someone you're with, you think they're in a dark space. I would say that would be what I would focus on first. It actually was my doctor who got me to realize I was in trouble. And so my doctor is part of my community, because I do need, I need to make sure that if things we're getting way too out of hand, he called. I don't even know his name. He's on the phone, on the other end of the phone. So that's one piece. The other bit for me around finding, pragmatically speaking, I do think sometimes it's easier to join. I'm a joiner, not a starter. And it is looking, so right now, ASM, if you don't know where to start, we have the Black Microbiology Association, Ari's community right there. So go ahead, and I would say reach out to both of them. And I'm going to be a bit forward. Put your information in the chat, Ari. So in case they don't know how to get a hold of you, get a hold and be part of it. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. You don't have to create an entire network. Then there are networks out there. Association for Women in Science, Black Women in Science and Engineering. There are a lot of these groups that you could be part of and show up. And if they're not, and if the space isn't there, it may be easier to create the space within the group. It may not be, but it might be easier for ASM to do a blast out to all the women of color who want to form an affinity group, if there isn't one. That may be the step in terms of that. I also recommend for people joining 12-step groups, not in replacement to therapy, not in replacement to anything in addition to. They are free. And the ones I think that can be helpful would be things like Codependent Anonymous, if you have an unhealthy, because some of us may have an unhealthy attachment to our work. So Codependent Anonymous, Workaholics Anonymous would be one I would also consider, and Debtors Anonymous. And Debtors Anonymous, because, if our finances aren't in order, it can make the work pressure even worse. So consider reaching out to those spaces. And even within those spaces, there are women's meetings, women's subsets within that space, and there are ethnic affinity groups within that. And one can even start an affinity group within a 12-step group for oneself. So I would say I would maybe lean towards that. I did try church, I'm going to put that out there. Was not successful. They told me not to be a victim. So that wasn't a helpful space for me to go in, but that may be someone else's experience. I also have a sister circle. So 7 of us meet twice a month. And we're committing to meet for a year, and we just talk about whatever. And that's been really helpful to have that, for me to talk about stuff. I also now, because of my voluntary work in the 12-step spaces and beyond, I do mentor other people too. And that does help to also recognize that sometimes I couldn't see that issue in myself, but being able to see somebody else and see it in them, I was like, okay, no, I'm doing the exact same thing. So that's been what's been helpful, and for me in community. But the reality is, McCauley, it did take me crashing out. And to go into Ari's point about isolation, it took me really crashing out. And everyone says get a great community. It was difficult to figure out where to go look, because I had a lot of Black professional women friends, really amazing women, but I realized now a lot of them have their own struggle. And so when I would go to them, they would say, it's not that bad, be grateful. You're a chief operating officer. be grateful. Or we all kind of go through that. It's not a big deal. After making the film, a lot of them now have admitted, yes, they are struggling, and they were struggling at that time. So I would say, don't feel, I can't tell you how to feel. I'm learning to accept that when I do run across women, and particularly Black women, who are not empathetic at all to this, there could be a lot going on with them that they're not ready to come to terms with. And it's just better for me, to detach with love and to move on, to find spaces where there is support and where people have been doing and are doing the work.
Thank you for that, Jimi. That some really great ideas in there, some of which I wouldn't have necessarily thought of. But I also think it's amazing to hear you say you were more of a joiner than a creator when you produced this entire documentary. So I think it's really wonderful. Pamela, I'm so glad you were able to get in. For the audience, Dr. Pamela McCauley is the third member of our panel, so I'm going to give her a few minutes to introduce herself. And then, Pamela, if you want to share your thoughts on kind of how people can try to find or build this community.
Sure. Well, thank you so much. And apologies for my technical difficulties in getting in, but thank God having a brilliant daughter next door here who could grab her device and get me connected. So here's to amazing women. But thank you for so much, Jimi, for your work here in this space. I mean, I think this is just so powerful. And I feel like what you've done here is really impactful and can be a way for so many of us out here to feel free to share how we're feeling and to be okay not being okay. My background, I've got my first engineering degree over 30 years ago, and I never dreamed we'd still be having these conversations like this today. And so today, and of course, I have absolutely loved my career as an engineer. I'm traveling in here at my alma mater and spoke to some students yesterday and shared part of the reason that my life's work has been not just my research as an industrial engineer in ergonomics and biomechanics, and then building my career in the academy, in academia, but also I feel like I've had a parallel track of DE&I, and I say we were doing DE&I before we had the initials, before we even knew had the DEI. Now we got B and J, and the alphabet continues to grow because there are so many issues. But I have so much wanted other women and people of color to be a part of engineering and STEM and really understand the tremendous opportunities. That said, the challenges are real. I mean, it's real, the things that we deal with as women and women of color, and the intersectionality is real as well. Now, that said, I think that it's worth the effort, but you can't do it alone. And I'm so glad we're having the conversations about not isolating, because isolation is not your friend when you're out here and you're trying to do these really ambitious and totally achievable things that are in front of you. But you do need that village. And it's important for us to be okay knowing that. And oftentimes as Black women, and we feel like we have that S on our chest and we have to take care of the family, the community, our careers, our parents, and the children. And, if there's anything left at the end of the day, then, we'll use it for us. But that's really not healthy, and it's not sustainable, particularly at the levels that Jimi and Ari and so many of us are aspiring to, because unfortunately, we haven't seen women who look like us in many of these positions. So we haven't had someone to say, well, Aunt Frankie did it, or my neighbor did it, and so I know how it's done. So we have to have that village and get that collective wisdom to guide us. And for me, it's been my circle of friends, but it's also been allies, people who don't look like me, who can tell me, these are some of the things that you're going to go through, or some of the things you might prepare for, sponsors and mentors. And so it's really important to build that village. And yeah, you need your sister friends that you can talk about certain things with, that, no question about that. But you also need those people who have been in those places as a part of your village that can be there to support you and give you some of that, the insights that you otherwise wouldn't have available to you. So my experience, again, has been one that I have loved. I mentioned that my husband always tells me, I'm so fortunate to love my work. And I work hard at addressing the challenges so I can continue to love it and be there for others who aspire and want to consider the similar paths. So today, I think, I don't know if I mentioned or Chandra, anyone else mentioned, but I'm Dean of Engineering. So I have been was a professor at the University of Central Florida for 27 years. And I actually stayed away from administration intentionally because I loved my life as a professor, and I've owned an engineering firm on this in addition to this for over 20 years. And I love working with students. I love having my lab and seeing my research have an impact, and doing work for NASA and Department of Defense, and then inspiring students. And one of the things I'm most proud of is that I've graduated 11 Black PhDs in engineering, Black men and women. And to me, to then send them out to continue the effort is it just makes me feel like my life has been worthwhile in my academic space, because again, I said the struggle is real, but equipping them with coping skills and mentoring them, helping them understand how to achieve for themselves, but also how to be there for others, has just been so important for me. And so my village continues to grow. Now my village is those who I've mentored, and they even inspire me on some of those bad days. So I don't want to take too much time. I want to make sure I leave time for questions. But that has been, my strategy to building my village, and making sure that in those difficult times, I don't isolate, and finding those folks that can be supportive. And maybe even if it's just reading email that I say from a student that I encouraged, and that helps me understand that the tough days are well worth it.
I just wanted to jump in. There's something you said, Pamela, that was really helpful. I love that. It's important for us to have people in our network from a wide range of backgrounds, executives, people who don't look like us, sponsors, mentors, and because they can show us the road forward. And I think that's really important, as well as having women look like us. And the issue about the superwoman chest, we have about the S, we've got to make it happen. And talking about, just to give some context about the cost for us about trying to be superwomen. As Black women, we have higher, almost every single index of health issues. We suffer the worst. So
yes.
It's not like we're doing this superwoman thing and then we're living longer. We're living shorter.
No, we're paying the cost. You're right.
We're living shorter. We're eating more. We're drinking more. We are, having more. We're sexing more. We're maladaptive. So it's like we're trying to force ourselves one way. We're gonna kind of soldier on, but it's actually showing up. From yelling and shouting and hitting our children or whatever. So actually we aren't. I think a lot of us aren't winning because I'm staying in this space, and in essence, I'm going to like 95-year-old Jimi and I'm choking her in her sleep. So I won't get to 95, and then I'm going to 90-year-old, and I'm going to 85-year-old. So we're paying a real price for this, being brave and soldiering, because I feel it impacts us in longevity. I've met several women in this journey, 30, 40-year-old women who've had little strokes or little heart attacks. And that's something that's common in our space. So it's not going nowhere. And my also comment around the importance of having a wide range of network. I am finding that what's been more important for me hasn't been the mentors or the sponsors. It really has been the women, the women of color. And a lot of the Black women who have in my circle are in their 70s. These are career women who have gone ahead of me, who can cheer me through, because I've had sponsors who don't see me. I've had people who've been a sponsor until their favorite, until someone who looks like them and I up the same role. And all of a sudden I don't have a sponsor anymore. But the consistency to know that bad things are going to happen, people are going to treat me some sort of way, but to remind me who I truly am, who I truly, truly, truly am, that's really essential. And that's been the biggest shift in my community, has been that, because that allows me to come back from a bad setback, come back from someone who yesterday was on my side and raising flying the Jimi flag, to like, I don't even know who you are. And then there's emerging study that suggests for women of color, actually our peer network is much more important for career longevity than the people who've been in different places. Because ultimately, when we get knocked down, and we do, who's going to help us actually get back up? And it's going to be, and that's going to be, for me, that's who my village. is in terms of that, the ones that I can really like ugly cry to for 45 minutes and not just have them say you're amazing, but actually they understand because they've been there. They've been in those boardrooms and they can hold that space for me and help me get back on track and remind me constantly who I am.
Jimi, I think that brings up a really good point of the kind of mental and physical toll this can take. And it really ties to a question that Claire has asked from our audience. She asked about challenging inequity and inequality really requires a lot of energy and emotional labor, which can take its toll. What motivations or what strategies do you use to keep yourself grounded and motivated? And so I'd be interested to hear about what all three of you, because you all are in this kind of space where you are fighting these inequalities. What strategies do you use to keep yourself grounded and motivated, and also, focus on your own health at the same time?
Well, I'll jump right in terms of strategies to keep me grounded and motivated. I'm a person of faith, a woman of faith, and I believe that is the source of my peace and my ambition and willingness to know that no matter what the challenges are, that I can overcome them. That said, I recognize that I need people here on this earth. I need resources. I need relationships. I need to be thinking strategically about, what the next 3 months and 3 years are going to look like, and not only what I need to do at early career. I would just be thinking about what I need to do from a career standpoint, but today I think about what I need to do from a self-care standpoint. The time off that I need to schedule, the time with girlfriends. I love Sunday brunch. Now I recently moved my mother who has dementia in with me, so then looking at how do I make time to take care of her, make sure she has the care she needs, but also to get my self-care and my time in addition to continuing to function at a high level as a dean. And so I think for me, again, being a woman of faith, but then truly applying strategic thinking and my good old industrial engineering background of putting good processes and resources in place in my personal life, in my career, and then making sure that self-care really is a priority. And, Jimi's right. It's so important, that peer network. One of my good friends, she's a former university president, and she used to say, where can a sister go for refuge? She said, you go home and you have to take care of the kids. You go to the church and they want you on all the committees, and then you go to work and then you got to get everything done there. So the only place we really have for refuge oftentimes feels like each other. And so we have to be there for one another. I mean, we have to. And I agree. And, the social science literature and studies have shown that women who have peer relationships actually have a higher job satisfaction, also a higher quality of life, have a happier outlook. And so it's vitally important that we definitely do that. And so that's been a part of my strategy. And sort of recap what I said before, but I mean, it's just so essential that we do that. And again, self-care has not been on the list for Black women. It hasn't been. My mother, the first time she ever got a massage, I paid for her to go for it, and she thought it was the most amazing experience in the world. But we just haven't done that historically.
I will also echo a lot of that. I think that I've tried to be more intentional about being strategic about taking care of myself. When I was in graduate school and a new mom, I ended up in the hospital one day with unexplained abdominal pain. I was just, in all of this pain. They could not figure out what was going on. And at the end of that experience, the medical team was like, we think you're under an obscene amount of stress and your body is having a visceral reaction to this stress and you can't, this is not sustainable. And so, I'm in a way thankful that, I was in my early 20s at the time. So I'm thankful that even so young, my body told me hey, we can't do this. And so because of that, I've had to be very cognizant of the amount of, emotional burden that I can take on, and making sure that I have myself well resourced at all times. And so I think that, mental health support is really important. I got a therapist around that time, and I was dealing with some postpartum, stuff also. And so like that was really instrumental in helping me get out of that or make it through that period. But like even now, just having a team of professionals that I needed at the time to help me be, physiologically okay, but then also having my, I have a small circle of other like Black women early career faculty on this campus where I am. And we kind of check in with each other all the time and try to make time and say, hey, we haven't heard from you in a while. What's going on? You haven't said anything. Are you okay? And so that has been really great. And then also I have had the privilege of having some older, Black women mentors who really helped me realize that this the challenges we face are a continuation of the ones that they faced when they were where we are. And so trying to see my work and my resistance and my push towards equity as one in a long chain of work that Black women have been doing for, generations. We have been, fighting this fight. And so I took some comfort in knowing that it's not just me, this is a legacy, and hopefully that the legacy of transformation that we bring as time continues to go on, we can try to limit or minimize the distress and the wear and tear that we have to experience as we work to build and create environments that are nurturing for us instead of harmful.
And Ari, can I just tell you how proud I am of your generation of Black women? I am so, so proud of you all, and how you aren't taking all the mess we did. You're standing up and saying, no, I am here. I am good, but I am not going to put up with a lot of the stuff that the previous generation of Black women did. And it just makes me so proud when I see the young Black women such as yourself in academia and in private industry and the whole STEM ecosystem really recognizing your worth and demanding what you deserve, and then also caring for yourselves and each other. So I'm just so pleased to see that change among us, and we could learn from you. I have some sisters that in my generation that are still working way too hard and just not quite getting it that, this is not what's in our best interest. So kudos to you and your generation for what you all are doing and how you are doing it.
Thank you. That really means a lot. Thank you for that.
So I wanted to, actually, I do echo a lot of what I think what Ari said about the importance of getting support and help, and actually getting the right kind of support to make that through. I think it's really, really important. And in terms of the self-care, Pamela, yes, that's essential. That we do need to learn what that means. My initial thought to that question was, how do I stay motivated? So again, being a woman of faith, copious amounts of profanity. A lot of this. And then sometimes you just want to speak in tongues, the copious amounts of profanity. You're going to be real. You just want to let it out. Crying. I mean, crying a lot. I cry now for everything. I was watching something on television, and I started to cry. It was the Hunger Games, the second film, and something was said, and the interviewer said, "Well, that's your opinion." I started to cry because they were sending these people back to be killed, and they was like, "Oh, it's wonderful. It's just for entertainment." I'm like, "No, we've done this before." And he said, "Well, that's your opinion," and I connected to that because I know what that's like to be at work and something terrible is happening, and someone just say, "Well, that's your opinion," and just dismiss it like that. And I've been very deliberate about really getting in connection with my emotions. So when I do feel like crying, it's more easy for me to cry because I have discovered, and again, I'm not a scientist. Well, I'm an engineer. I'm a pretend engineer, so I'm not I'm sure many of you guys can let me know if this is true, but I believe human beings were born with tear ducts. Most human beings were born with tear ducts, which means crying is a physiological function that we've trained ourselves not to do. So I'm really working to train myself to actually start to cry. So when I go to the hospital and I'm waiting, and I happened recently, I was in the hospital waiting room for like several hours, I got there at 6 a.m. I felt really unhappy about that. And I was able to check myself, you know what? I'm going to cry. I'll wait my turn, but I can sit here and cry. It's not, it's private. And I started to cry, proper crying. And I mean, they quickly came out to help me. Oh, but I realized, why am I'm so used to holding in how I feel. That's just it's like, no one here knows me, and no one here is going to kick me out for crying at a hospital. What's for crying at a hospital? And so for me, getting much more in touch with how I feel and recognizing that is important for me, because it allows me to take care of myself by, in that moment, connecting with how I feel in that moment. I think what's also one of the ways that keeps me motivated, it's different now because of the work I do, but really connecting what I'm doing to my purpose. Is what I'm doing meaningful? And now I believe what I'm doing now is inherently meaningful. But when I was working, but recognizing, I think it's important for all of us to understand, just being a woman in this field of science, you are challenging inequality. Just existing every day as a woman and a person of color in a scientific industry, your presence is a challenge. And even if you're not doing anything else, you're not, organizing, workshops or all the likes, showing up every day is, and to know there's purpose in that. There is a purpose in that. And remembering I am making a difference just being here. That has helped me on times I feel discouraged. The other point is recognizing I'm not here to change the world. And to use another, again, all my family are ministers, or on my mother's side. To the example, in my faith, we believe that many of us believe Jesus came to change the world. They killed him. You have to understand. So I'm not, and it's a bit grandiose, I'm not interested. No, thank you. Leave that for those. I'm not here to be a martyr or a messiah for anybody. So I actually really kind of pick the battles I can pick. So what helps me is I know I can make a small difference. That's good. That's okay for me to make a small difference. And just keep, and to know that I can come back another day. I can come back another day. And that really helps me stay motivated. I'm not trying to do anything particularly grand. I'm just here, cry, swear, speak in tongues. I feel my feelings, and just keep it in the day. That really helps me keep going.
Jimi, can I say you're probably making much more of a difference than you think. This film is just one small example. I'm sure your impact is much, much more than you think. And your point about purpose-driven living is so central to my life. And for me, that's a stress reliever. Because if I feel like I am doing what I was put here to do, and this is my purpose, there's very little that other people or other situations or environments can really do to prevent me from achieving what I am put here to accomplish. And for me, that has been a huge source of stress relief. I have engaged in the copious amounts of profanity as well, and lots of praying, crying as well. So all of those, and even speaking in tongues. And at the end of the day, though, I feel very satisfied in feeling like I am moving toward what I was put here to accomplish. And so the challenges and the difficulties that come, sure, they are going to be there. And I see my presence as a woman of color. Obviously, there are the challenges, but I also like to feel that part of my purpose is to let it be a source of hope and inspiration for those who are coming behind us, for the little girls who may just be understanding what an engineer does or what biomechanics is, And so I think it's so important as we deal with the challenges, just to realize how precious you are, Jimi, and what you're doing and what you have done. And so many of us who come out here and continue to make these efforts on a day-to-day basis, because it does matter to us, and because we do feel like it's a part of our purpose. So I dare say that you are making a great difference in the world with your work.
So to close us out, if each of you could take just a kind of a minute and share with the group, if you could go back and share one piece of advice or lesson learned with your younger self, what would that be?
I can go first. I think that one of the things that someone told me when I arrived here as a postdoc has been just really, really helpful for me is, science, the way that we do science, the way the ecosystem works, like it's a back and forth of criticism and critique. Like our work is always being evaluated. Someone always has an opinion. Someone always has something to say. There's always room for improvement. There's always, this, drive to keep moving things forward, keep doing things better. And sometimes, that constant criticism and constant, rejection that comes as part of, whether it's applying for funding or, trying to get things published or stuff not working, like you have to find a way to embrace that constant cycle of critique without having it impact you. And so their advice to me that I wish I had known earlier was there is a small circle of people who get to comment on your value, your purpose, your effectiveness, and really who you are and your strength. And like all of this other criticism that you might get, whether it be from your instructors or other professors or your colleagues or whatever, they don't get to comment on those core things that you hold dear as telling you who you are and what you're made of and what you're capable of. And so you have to be really, really guarded about who you allow into that space to be able to speak those kind of words into you, and that it's okay to put up, and you should put up, boundaries internally, so that just because someone is in a position of supervision over you doesn't mean that they get automatic access to be able to affect the way you feel about yourself. And that was really, really, really just time and again, I'm reminded of how really amazing that advice is, because it's really true. Sometimes you get in environments where there are hierarchies involved, and you feel like just because someone is an executive or an administrator or a supervisor, that they can tell you or get to say things that you can then need to internalize about your own effectiveness or your worth or your value or the things that you care about. And that is just simply not something that they get to have access to. That's something that someone has to earn. And so just get in the practice of saying, like, has that person earned their way into me taking what they've said about me this seriously or not? So that would be my advice to my younger self.
That's great advice,
Ari.
Ari. Thank you.
That is beautiful. That is so beautiful, Ari. And because you rock, and it's so important that we can say that to each other and to ourselves. Seriously. And it's so important to me that we do say that to ourselves. I had a good Baptist upbringing. And so, as a good Christian girl, you didn't talk about, yourself, and you were, good at something. And so for my younger self, I would teach myself to celebrate me more, to be willing to recognize and acknowledge and share with other people my achievements, and know the mere fact, ladies, that we are here. That says, you got it going on. And not just the technical competencies and everything we went through to be here from a professional standpoint, but the battles that you had to wage to get here, the challenges that you face on a daily basis. So taking time to celebrate and acknowledge yourself, I would say that to my younger self, But I learned that my daughter says, I'll celebrate anything. Okay, so we need to start having some celebrations, cooking some meals, popping some champagne. You saying at a girl, because so often we're waiting for other people to do that. And I would tell myself that to celebrate more, to appreciate more of those little things. Yeah, that paper got rejected, but guess what? I submitted 2 more last week. Okay. And so not letting that get us down. And the other thing I would say to my younger self, and this is something that we don't do, and this could take time, so I'm gonna be real brief. Keep your mind on your money and your money on your mind. Because we get so passionate about our work, we look around and the fella next to us has gotten promotions and raises. We need to be mindful of our worth and demand what we deserve. And so I was in that situation. I was shocked when I was writing my book and I was doing the chapter on making sure that you're compensated fairly. I decided to compare my wages with my peers, and the white male that had been hired 2 years after me was making more money than me and wasn't doing near the work. But it was my own fault. I was so upset with myself because I hadn't kept my focus on that. I was passionate in the lab working with my students, but I wasn't focused on making sure I was paid what I deserve. So those would be the 2 things that I would say to my younger self. Make sure you appreciate where you are, who you are, and the things that you've come through to be here. And then make sure that you are insisting on getting what you deserve in terms of recognition, compensation, and rewards.
Thank you.
I would tell my younger self, the biggest thing would be to be more Jimi, to be more unabashedly, unreservedly, unapologetically myself, to explore what that means to be Jimier, to be a Pamela, McCauley-ish, Irie-ish, like really fully lock down on who I am and to dance to the beat of my own drum. I would tell myself, Jimi, there is nothing wrong with you. There is nothing wrong with you. Seek out people who want to make you even more Jimi versus trying to make you someone else. And the biggest thing I would tell myself is, Jimi, you're doing the best you can. You're doing the best you can, and I'm so proud of you. And you make me so happy. I am so proud of you. Oh, that's what I would tell my younger self.
Beautiful.
I think this has been all beautiful. There's comments in the chat about how wonderful all the audience has really appreciated this conversation. I want to thank all of you for not just sharing your time with us, but also your vulnerability. Coming in and sharing your experiences and being open. And we've had those conversations about isolation versus support, and I really think that it starts with conversations like this where people are open and show their vulnerability and show that it's okay to talk about these things. I think it's been a great panel session. Everybody's saying thank you in the chat. And so thank you from me and ASM. It's been a wonderful conversation. And Jimi, thank you for the documentary.
Yes,
it's really a great documentary.